Today on Alex and Autos, we're taking a look at the 2015 Dodge Charger. Now the Dodge Charger is kind of a tricky vehicle because this spans from essentially $28,000 on up to $70,000, and as such it competes with a wide variety of competition. The base V6 version of this vehicle competes with the Chevy Impala, perhaps the Buick LaCrosse, the Toyota Avalon, the Kia Cadenza, the Hyundai Azera, and the Ford Taurus. The 5.7-liter V8 version that we're taking a look at here competes with the likes of the Chevy SS as well as the Ford Taurus SHO. But we also have the 6.4-liter V8 version, which I suppose you could also call competition for the Chevy SS. Then we have the insane 707 horsepower version, which really doesn't compete with anything. 2015 is not a complete redesign, but it is a significant refresh of the same basic vehicle. So we get an entirely new look up front, new hood, new quarter panels, new doors, and a new back end look as well. Personally, I find this look a little bit more harmonious and a little bit more aggressive than the 2014 look. We have these LED fog lamps down here that are optional. Halogen high beams and low beams are standard, but you can get HIDs and auto headlamps optionally as well. Our model has the optional radar cruise control and pre-collision warning system, so we do get this radar sensor right there in the middle. The Charger comes in essentially two different lengths. The one that we're taking a look at right here is just over 198 inches long, and if you get the SRT version, then we do get a slight increase to just over 200 inches. That's all down to the cooling required for that larger engine. We don't actually get any increased room on the inside. It's obvious when you look at the side profile that this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. The rear-wheel drive look is undeniably attractive, but it does have a few downsides. We do get a little bit less legroom up front, especially width in the driver's side and passenger side footwells, and we don't get quite as much room in the back as we would in a front-wheel drive vehicle with roughly the same exterior proportions. The rear end of the Challenger has also been tweaked for 2015. We still have this very pert-looking rear end, a definite bumper going on, which is becoming a little bit rarer these days. We now have well-integrated exhaust tips integrated into the bumper, better integrated rear parking sensors, and this very signature tail lamp look with these LEDs that now wrap all the way around in a smoother appearance. The backup camera has been integrated a little bit better into the rear end, and the trunk release button is right over here on this side of the E. Under the hood, things start out very similar to the competition. We have a V6 engine. It produces either 292 horsepower or 300 horsepower. From that point on, things get very, very different from everything else in this segment, except for that Chevy SS. That's because we're taking a look at a 5.7-liter V8 engine under this hood. This produces 370 horsepower. What's crazy about the Charger, however, is this is not where the Charger stops with its V8 engines. This is simply where it starts. We also have a 485 horsepower 6.4-liter V8 and a 707 horsepower 6.2-liter supercharged V8 available. All four of these engines are mated to a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, sending power to the rear wheels by default. All-wheel drive is still available in the Charger for 2015, but you can only get it in the V6 engine. I'll let you refer to the fuel economy chart on the side of your screen, but the takeaway here is that the V6 model with all-wheel drive claims to get best-in-category fuel economy. That's not too difficult because there aren't very many options with all-wheel drive, of course, in this category. But the big takeaway really is the 6.4-liter V8 engine, because it still gets 25 miles per gallon on the highway. And in fact, if you drive it very gently, I was able to get about 29 on a 60-mile one-way trip. It's really only a 1 mile per gallon toll versus this 5.7-liter V8 engine, even though you do get 485 horsepower. Front seat comfort comes in at 9 out of 10 points. These seats have been improved slightly over the outgoing generation of Charger, and they now are a little bit softer, so you sink a little bit further into the seat, which is something I appreciate. Our model has the 4-way adjustable lumbar support, which is a very nice feature, and the passenger seat also gets that 4-way adjustable lumbar support. We also have an electric tilt telescopic steering column in this model that's linked to the 2-position seat memory and power adjustable pedals via this knob right over here. Taller drivers should beware that if you do get the optional sunroof, we do lose almost 2 inches of headroom. And at 6 feet tall, my hair does brush the ceiling if I sit upright in this seat. The seat is all the way at the bottom of its travel. You should also know that if you have larger shoes, the rear-wheel drive nature of this vehicle means that the footwell is a little bit more cramped than you'll find in most of the competition, and that's both horizontally and vertically. The rear seats come in at 8 out of 10 points. If you get the sunroof, we don't get any loss of headroom, but headroom is a little bit shorter than you'll find in some of the competition. Sitting right here behind myself, I have about 3 to 4 inches of legroom left, and if I scoot over to the right side of the vehicle, you'll notice that two things. We have a slightly larger hump, obviously, than you'll find in front-wheel drive cars. We also have a decent amount of legroom over on this side as well. This front seat is all the way back in its tracks. I still have about 2 inches of legroom left. Because of this vehicle's rear-wheel drive layout, you will find more combined legroom, and that's front legroom plus rear legroom in several of the competitors. You'll also notice that the entries with a more upright profile in the rear do get more rear headroom. Rear passengers are treated to optional heated rear seats and USB charge-only ports. Rear passengers get a softly padded center armrest with 2 large fixed cup holders, a small storage cubby right there, and the rear seats do fold in a 60-40 folding fashion. They don't fold completely flat, however. At 16.5 cubic feet, the Charger's trunk is by no means small, but it is decently smaller than the Ford Taurus's trunk. It's about 20% smaller or so. That said, the Charger's trunk has a very good shape to it. This is a 24-inch roller bag. I have a 26-inch roller bag right there in the trunk, and I can stack 2 bags one on top of the other. I can also fit another set of 24-inch roller bags right over here on this side. Getting the optional Beats audio system does eat into your trunk space just a little bit. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, I'm going to have to give this 8 out of 10 points because we don't get quite as much room in here as we do find in some of those front-wheel drive competitors. That's really just a side effect of the rear-wheel drive nature of this vehicle. You have to decide whether you want the rear-wheel drive dynamic or whether you want more trunk room. The Charger does gain some points for having a very sturdy handle on the inside to help close the trunk. On the inside, we find height adjustable seatbelts for both the driver and the front passenger and 2-way adjustable headrests. Since we're in the RT model, we get RT embroidered on the front seat backs, and the seat is a combination of leather and faux suede. We have a perforated section on the seat right there below the RT logo. That's because these are ventilated as well as heated. The front door panels are composed of mostly soft touch plastics. We have a soft touch injection molded upper portion right here, a pleather insert right there that is soft touch. You'll find this red portion hard plastic, but this armrest is a soft touch plastic as well. You'll find more interior color combinations available in the Charger than in most of the entries in this segment. Our particular entry is this two-tone red interior. On the passenger side, we do have a large glove compartment. It is a 2-tiered affair, so we have this fixed tray above, small compartment on this side, larger compartment right there for the instruction manual, and I was able to barely fit a small tablet computer right inside. Interior plastics quality is something that the first generation Charger really had problems with, but that's significantly improved in the later generations of this vehicle. Moving over to the dashboard, we have this somewhat retro theme going on with this large trim panel right here. It has sort of an interesting metallic honeycomb type texture to it. In between the two vents, we have this large color touchscreen infotainment system. If you want to know more about this, go ahead and click that banner at the bottom of your screen. You'll be taken on over to my review of the Uconnect 8.4 system in a different vehicle. This color touchscreen system is where you will find things like the controls for your ventilated seats, your heated seats, heated steering wheel, dimming mirror, etc., as well as duplicate buttons for the climate control system. The particular Charger model that we are in has this Super Track Pack button right over here. If we click that, that's a shortcut within the system to the performance control pages that are unique to SRT models and of course models with the Super Track Pack. This screen is where you will find launch control and the ability to change the way the drive modes work in this vehicle. So for instance, we can go over here to drive mode setup, and you can change whether or not the engine transmission is in sport or normal, paddles are on, off, traction controls sport or normal, and whether the steering is normal, sport, or comfort. And that does link with the sport button right down here as well. So you can choose the way you want sport mode set up and the way you want the default mode set up. We also have this option for performance pages right over here on the left. It'll take a little bit to load because this is an app within this Uconnect system. Now once loaded, this app gives you vehicle timers, so for instance 0 to 60, quarter mile, etc. We also get some duplicate gauges and additional gauges that you get in the center console, coolant temperature, oil temperature, etc. Battery voltage, intake air temperature. We have a G-force gauge, which is kind of nifty. And then we have this engine screen, which I find quite interesting. It shows you not only your speed, but how many horsepower and how many pound-feet of torque your engine is producing at any one moment. Gives you a gear indicator right there and the oil pressure in the middle. Working our way down the dashboard, we do not have a door on this compartment like you'll find in the Chrysler 300, but we do have a 12-volt power outlet right there. It is sized such that you can put a smartphone right inside there and it doesn't really cause you a problem. We have a T-bar sort of shifter right here, button on the side, all the way down for drive. Manual is over on the left, up for down, and down for up. To the right of the shifter, we have a small cubby right there, which you can put a smartphone in at an angle. Behind that, we have 2 large cup holders, easily able to accommodate large takeout drinks on both sides. Behind that, we have a large and softly padded center armrest. This opens up to reveal some additional storage. This is also where you'll find the SD card slot, USB input, and auxiliary input for that Uconnect system. We have a small storage tray that is removable, and a relatively deep compartment for a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Over on the driver's side, we have an analog dial for the tachometer and the speedometer, but in the center, we now have a 7-inch color LCD instrument cluster. This instrument cluster is very similar to what you find in the Chrysler 200 and a slight variant on what you find in the Jeep Grand Cherokee. The display is controlled via this 4-way button bank on the left side of the steering wheel with an OK button in the center. This display contains some fixed gauges, so we have engine temperature right over here and fuel level on the right side, as well as the transmission mode selector display and a digital speedometer at the top. You can also select a variety of different features, so right now we're taking a look at the fuel economy display. We also have our trip info, we have audio, we have messages. This tells you whether or not something's wrong with your vehicle. We then have the ability to set up the screen a variety of different ways, a digital speedometer. We can also choose from vehicle info. This is where you start finding duplicate gauges. This is our tire pressure. It looks like one of our rear tires is low. I'll have to address that. We have coolant temperature, transmission temperature, etc. These are duplicated also in that optional Super Track Pack display in Uconnect. We can then go down to our performance screen. This is not available in all Charger models. It depends on your trim level. We do have 0 to 60 timers, etc. displayed right in there. Moving on down, we have driver assistance systems. This tells you the status of your radar, cruise control, etc. And we again have our fuel economy screen. If we were operating in 4-cylinder mode, there would be a little 4-cylinder icon right there in the center of that gauge telling you that you're operating in cylinder deactivation mode. Moving out from there, we see the new corporate steering wheel from the Chrysler brands. We have shift paddles on the back. This is also where you'll find the track up and down buttons on the back of the steering wheel, and volume up and down on the right side of the steering wheel. On the front side of the steering wheel, on the right side, we have our cruise control buttons. We also have radar cruise control in this vehicle, so there's some additional buttons on the bottom. The system is quite intuitive. If you want to use regular cruise control, you enable it and disable it via this cruise control button. If you want to use the radar adaptive cruise control, you use this button down here. This is that button bank I showed you earlier to control that screen there in the center. And then we have dedicated phone hang-up, pickup, and voice command buttons. Obviously, the first thing you'll notice about the Charger out on the road in any form is that this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. And everything else, as I've been saying in this segment, that competes with this is a front-wheel drive vehicle, the Avalon, the Taurus, etc. Sure, there are some all-wheel drive entries, but all-wheel drive entries do not feel the same way as a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Even rear-wheel biased all-wheel drive entries don't feel the same way. That means that although the steering is relatively light in the Charger, it is very accurate. We also get a decent amount more feedback than we get in any of the other entries. Now, again, admittedly, there's not a whole lot of feedback going on these days for vehicles with electric power steering, but this is still better than anything else in this segment. The second thing you'll notice really is the headroom. Again, I'm 6 feet tall, my hair is brushing the ceiling, and if I sit very upright, my head will touch the ceiling on occasion. Now, that's not enough to keep me from buying the Charger, but it is enough to keep me from buying the sunroof. Let's dive straight into the numbers. This 5.7-liter V8 engine that we tested here ran from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds even, which is an incredible time, especially considering that there was a decent amount of tire spin out the back. I suspect that if you got even wider tires, even grippier tires, or if you were on a good surface, then you could actually get that down to 4.8, 4.9. To put that 0 to 60 time in perspective, every other entry in this segment is going to be running between 6.5 and 7.5 seconds 0 to 60, except for the Taurus SHO. The SHO will be right around 6 seconds or so. Some publications have put the Taurus SHO as low as 5.5 seconds, but the Taurus is never going to be as fast as the 5.7-liter V8. You may be wondering how that's possible, since it produces almost the same amount of power, and in theory the turbochargers should give it a more advantageous torque and horsepower curve. The answer is all down to the transmission as well as to the drive system. In addition, this Charger's gearing really helps us out a bit too. Because this is the RT Road and Track version, it's about 1/10 of a second faster than the regular 5.7 because it gets a different rear axle ratio. Logically, that altered rear axle ratio should cause a very slight drop in our highway fuel economy. That's really the trade-off. If you get a 6.4-liter V8, your 0 to 60 times will be right in the 4-second range. Exactly where in the 4-second range depends on which 6.4-liter V8 you get. If you get the Scat Pack model, which has much narrower tires in the back, it will obviously take longer to get to 60. If you get the SRT version with the dynamic suspension system and the wider tires, it won't take quite as long. If you get the Hellcat, obviously there are some absolutely insane 0 to 60 times coming out of that vehicle, and it really depends on what surface you're on, whether you have racing slicks on the vehicle, etc., and exactly how willing you are to just fly off and run into a tree. So you do have to be careful with that, but I have been seeing numbers in the 3-second range. With all that acceleration ability, you may be surprised that I'm going to give this 8 out of 10 points when it comes to the braking score. Some of that has to do with the tires. I do find that most versions of the Charger are a little bit under-tired, so the tires could be wider, they could be grippier for the size vehicle, as well as the horsepower we have under the hood. Overall, brake fade was well controlled, but it was a little bit higher than I would have liked. I'm going to give cabin noise 9 out of 10 points. This is a fairly quiet cabin, even though we do have wider tires on most versions of the Charger than you'll find on the competition. Now, I realize that goes contrary to what I just said about the tires being a little bit undersized, but you have to keep in mind this is a bigger vehicle and it's heavier than many of its competitors as well, so you would expect the tires to be wider. You may be further surprised to know that I'm going to give this 5.7-liter V8 engine 9 out of 10 points when it comes to fuel economy. Same goes really for the V6 entry. I'm also going to give 8 out of 10 points to the 6.4-liter V8 engine. If you're wondering how that's possible, it's all down again to this 8-speed automatic transmission, as well as the cylinder deactivation system that we get in the 5.7 and 6.4 liter V8 engines. To give you an idea of what's going on, by the time this vehicle reaches 35 miles an hour driving it very gently, it's already in 6th gear. That means it's already used all the gears that all the rest of the competition has, and it still has 2 more gears left, and that helps improve fuel economy at higher speeds, of course. By the time you hit 35, this vehicle has also entered 4-cylinder mode, again if you're driving it very gently. The 6.4 liter engine is a little bit different. It won't enter 4-cylinder mode until a little bit later, maybe about 40 to 45 miles an hour, and it will actually kick out of that 4-cylinder mode a little bit earlier. So right around 75, 76 miles an hour, it won't be in 4-cylinder mode anymore. That really just has to do with some of the vibration issues and harmonic issues that are different in the 6.4 liter V8 engine. What that really means to you is that on a 2-way highway trip in California here in the San Francisco Bay Area, I averaged 29 miles per gallon in this 5.7 liter V8 engine. That's extraordinarily good for this vehicle. Now again, this is not direct competition for the Toyota Avalon or the Kia Cadenza or the Hyundai Azera, but those vehicles would struggle to get that kind of fuel economy on that same run. Things drop by only about 1 to 2 miles per gallon in the 6.4 liter V8 on that same trip. And that really is a big deal there because that vehicle's only direct corollary is the Chevy SS, and the SS gets much worse fuel economy. Even in this RT Road and Track version, I'm going to give the ride 10 out of 10 points. The ride is very well polished in the Charger all the way around. A big factor in the ride in the Charger, however, is actually the wheelbase. That's the distance between the front wheels and the rear wheels. It's really quite long in this vehicle, a decent amount longer than most of the entries in this segment. As I've said a few other times, I'm going to have to separate handling feel from handling ability because the handling feel in the Charger is absolutely excellent. 10 out of 10 points, absolutely without question in this segment, again because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Actual handling ability, I'm going to give it 9 out of 10 points. I'm going to drop it just 1 point down, again because I do think that these tires are a little bit narrow for the amount of power we have under the hood. Now on the flip side of that, that simply increases the fun factor to some people, and I will admit that I do find that a little bit fun now and then. Things start out with the V6, SE, and SXT trims. Those would be the ones that compete with the Avalon, the Impala, the Cadenza, the Taurus, etc. V6, rear-wheel drive standard, all-wheel drive is optional. Ford's Taurus is an interesting option because it competes both with the SE and the SXT models, those would be the V6 trims, and this 5.7 liter V8 in a way. Ford offers the Taurus SHO, which is the all-wheel drive high horsepower version of the Taurus. However, it doesn't have the same amount of horsepower that we have in this model, and it still has a 6-speed automatic transmission under the hood. That makes a huge difference when it comes to 0 to 60 performance. This ran 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat. The Taurus SHO is about half a second to 3/4 of a second slower. That means that the Taurus SHO is actually in between the V6 version of the Charger and the V8 version of the Charger as far as performance goes. That really leaves this 5.7 liter V8 model without any true competition. The 5.7 liter V8 model comes in RT or RT Road and Track trims, which is a little bit confusing because I always thought that RT stood for Road and Track. The Road and Track version of the RT trim does come with a slightly different rear axle ratio, which improves 0 to 60 time. It doesn't actually improve it that much in my tests, however. It was only about 1/10 of a second different. The big thing that rear axle ratio changes for you is that we get a slight reduction in real-world highway fuel economy, and we also get the ability to do better burnouts in the 5.7. The next step up is the RT Scat Pack, which does have kind of a funny name to it. It's basically this same vehicle, only they jam the 6.4 liter engine under the hood. You get an awful lot more power and an awful lot better performance. It's about $40,000. The big thing to know about the RT Scat Pack is that they've essentially just done an engine swap. Very little else on the car actually changes for that Scat Pack version. So if you want the braking and the handling and the other performance abilities of the vehicle to also improve along with the performance, that would be the SRT 392 model for $47,000. That SRT 392 model really is the one that competes with the Chevy SS. Now the rumor mill tells us that the Chevy SS will likely be discontinued after the 2015 model year. This obviously isn't going anywhere anytime soon, so next year there will really be no true competition for the SRT 392 either. The SRT 392 contains 3 main changes that differentiate it from the Scat Pack version. We get much larger brakes, we get 275 with tires, which are much wider than the 245s that you get on this model, as well as the RT Scat Pack, and we also get a dynamically adjustable suspension system. The biggest changes, of course, are the brakes and the tires, because the SRT 392 handles much better than the RT version. Handling is not necessarily this car's forte. There are a lot of front-wheel drive vehicles that will go around a corner faster than this vehicle. Specifically, light entries like Audi's A3 will definitely go around a corner faster than this Dodge Charger, even though it is front-wheel drive. However, this feels much more fun in the corners. It actually feels quite lively in the corners, even in this particular 5.7-liter model. Liveliness really is what the Scat Pack is all about, because you don't get any more grip in the Scat Pack, but you get an awful lot more power under the hood. But that's really the point and the fun with that Scat Pack model. You get an incredible amount of power for just $40,000, and it's an awful lot of fun out on the road. Very much like the RT to the RT Scat Pack transition, the transition from the SRT 392 to the SRT Hellcat model doesn't really involve many major changes other than the engine. That means we still get 275 width tires front and rear. So it really should tell you something about how that vehicle handles and performs. I think that this vehicle is a little bit under-tired for the amount of power and the amount of weight that it has. It makes a little bit of fun out on the road. The RT Scat Pack is definitely under-tired for the amount of power we have under the hood. The SRT 392 is only slightly under-tired, but a lot of fun out on the road. You can guess exactly where the Hellcat comes in that equation. It too is definitely under-tired for 707 horsepower, which makes it an awful lot of fun out on the road. It's very lively. Commenters on the preview video wanted me to talk about operational costs, so there it is on that side of your screen right over there. Key things to know here are that the V6 engine operates on regular unleaded, so that really does cause a drop in operational costs. And it would cause a drop in operational costs even if the V8 engine got the same fuel economy. The other takeaway from that chart really is the fact that the SRT 6.4-liter V8 engine isn't that big of a penalty over the 5.7-liter V8 that we've been testing in this model. And now it's time for opinions and recommendations. If you're after fuel economy, then something like the Nissan Maxima is probably going to deliver the best real-world fuel economy in this segment. It will have a CVT under the hood, will have a decent amount of power, not as much torque, obviously, as this 5.7-liter V8 engine, but it's going to be a relative amount of fun out on the road. Now, some people really dislike the way CVTs feel, so that may cross that vehicle off your shopping list. If you want a really big trunk, that would be the Ford Taurus. Its trunk is nearly 20% larger than this vehicle. The Taurus SHO is an awful lot of fun, and it's definitely more fun than the all-wheel drive versions of the V6 Charger. However, the Taurus SHO is not as fast as this 5.7-liter V8 model that we're taking a look at right here. The new ZF 8-speed automatic transmission has made a huge difference in the performance of the Charger in every version. My favorite V6 entry in this segment by far is the Charger. I would actually get the rear-wheel drive model. I wouldn't get the all-wheel drive model because I think that defeats some of the point of getting the rear-wheel drive car in the first place. My personal opinion is that if you're living in the snow belt and you're looking at the V6 version of the Charger because of the all-wheel drive, then I would actually spend that extra cash on good winter tires in the rear and not worry about the all-wheel drive at all. If you're looking at the 5.7-liter version of the Charger, then I would actually get the Chrysler 300 instead. It is a little bit more expensive, but it has a slightly nicer interior. I think I like the overall look of the interior a little bit more. I do like the exterior shape a tiny bit more, especially for something that's a little bit more luxurious. If you want the RT Road and Track version, there is no corresponding Chrysler model. And of course, Chrysler has said that there is no longer going to be a Chrysler 300 SRT8 model. That means if you want that 6.4-liter engine, this is the only way to go. Now, 0 to 60 in 5 seconds flat is very fast, but the 6.4-liter version will do it much faster. And actually, that 6.4-liter version of this is going to be a hair faster than the Chevy SS. The reason for that is all down to the 8-speed automatic transmission. The Chevy SS only has a 6-speed. The Chevy definitely handles better than the Scat Pack RT thanks to the 245 with tires that the Dodge gets. However, if you take a look at the SRT 392, I think that actually handles a little bit better than the Chevy SS, although the feel behind the wheel is actually better in the Chevy. So it really depends on whether you want the extra power and the extra handling, or you want the better feel. If you're after batshit crazy, of course, there's nothing like the 707 horsepower Hellcat engine that is more power than you get in a Dodge Viper. For those that are counting, that's also more power than you will find in a BMW M5 or a BMW M6 or any Mustang or any Camaro. 707 horsepower is an absolutely insane amount of horsepower, and I wouldn't buy that one either. However, I am really glad that the Hellcat model exists because my favorite version of the Charger really is that SRT 392 version. Without the Hellcat model capping this model range, that $47,000 SRT 392 might seem like an overindulgence. After all, who needs nearly 500 horsepower? But because the Hellcat exists, all of a sudden it makes that 6.4-liter engine under the hood seem strangely rational. That means that when your grandmother or your old maiden aunt asks you why you chose the nearly 500 horsepower engine option, you can say, well, you know, it was the rational choice. I didn't pick the high horsepower one, I got the more economical option.